Just before my 19th birthday, got posted to Peckham in South East London. Racism in those days wasn't institutional, it was compulsory. Investigate it properly, and with a bit of luck, catch the burglar. Hook me up to the blood pressure machine, right? Because he's going up and up and up as you speak. Staring down the barrel of a sawn-off shotgun.
Just like most people, I've always appreciated the truth, someone that speaks their mind and tells it as it is, even when it's not popular. And I've been fighting luxury watch crime now for almost 4 years. But today, I'm going to meet a man who spent his entire career catching criminals, sometimes working undercover and putting his own life at risk. Today's video isn't just about watch crime, it's about London, how it's changed, and one man's experience as a serving detective in the Metropolitan Police back in the 1980s. Peter Bleksley is now the go-to former detective for the mainstream media. This is his story. Peter, first of all, I want to really thank you so much for coming along today. It's an absolute honour and a pleasure to meet you. I've actually followed you a lot on YouTube over the years. You've got yourself quite a reputation these days.
Good or bad?
Well, I think it's good. I mean, the first thing that, when you come on the TV, the first thing that strikes me is, look, is that copper that actually knows what the score is and tells the truth and says it as it is. You built up quite a following. Do you think that's why? Because people appreciate what you're saying and, more importantly, believe what you're saying?
Well, my following increased hugely when I was fronting that Channel 4 programme, Hunted, you know, when I was the chief on Hunted. And I did that for 4 series of the main show and 2 of the celebrity versions. But I left that show in 2019 and my following has continued to sort of grow. I mean, it's not vast. It's still, for a bloke like me who was a lowly detective constable and then has done a few bits on TV, to have a following of that size is very flattering.
Yeah, and you mainly appear on other people's channels, don't you? You know, James English, etc. So you've had, you know, over the years, there's been millions of views. So there'll be a lot of my viewers watching this right now will be aware of who you are. Some might not necessarily, so it's a bit of a new audience, but as you know, I concentrate mainly on watch crime, which we'll get onto a little bit later on. But whilst I've got you here today, I'm going to take advantage of that and talk to you a little bit about your life and your career in the police force and what you did. Just briefly for the viewers, take us back to the beginning, Peter. Where did it all start for you?
Well, we have to rewind a long time, unfortunately. So 1977, I joined the Metropolitan Police Cadets at 17 years of age. I'd been a bit of an errant sort of kid. School wasn't particularly my thing. I'd gone to work as a warehouseman, and my mum had loftier ambitions for me. So I came home one night, and there was a huge, great uniformed police officer sitting on the sofa in the flat that I shared with my mum. And he tried to talk this young kid into joining the police, and he did a brilliant job of it. But he wasn't just there to talk me into it, he was also there to have a little look-see as well. And he very cleverly said to me, you know, what are your interests? Oh, you know, and all of that. And I was telling him about the football team and the records that I listened to and all of that. He said, oh, let me have a look at your record collection. So, of course, he got into the bedroom so he could see what posters were on the wall and that kind of thing. It was a clever bit of vetting, you'd call it these days. But it was just an old school copper using a bit of common sense and having a nose around. And he pulled the forms out and I'd filled them in you know, that night.
And away you went.
And away I went. So 18 months as a cadet until I was 18 and a half. Then you went up to the other end of the training estate in Hendon, and I became a PC, got sworn in, took my oath, all of that, did the training up there, loved it, both the academic and the physical. And then just before my 19th birthday, got posted to Peckham in southeast London. So it's 1978, an area with a sizable Afro-Caribbean population, a lot of chronic social deprivation, poverty, and a very, very interesting place. And if I thought I'd been a bit of a Jack the Lad from the London suburbs, well, when I got to Peckham, I suddenly realised that I was just a marshmallow. And I came across some very, very tough people.
What year would that have been?
1978.
1978. So that was, when was the Brixton riots? That was
1981, and I was there from the off on that fateful weekend. What happened back in those days, and it's anybody who denies it who was in policing is just not telling the truth. And the unsavoury truth is that many young black men got picked on, and if their face didn't fit or if they resisted, they could find themselves getting fitted up, in other words having evidence planted on them, or they'd find themselves getting beaten up, or both. It was appalling. Policing wasn't by consent for that community. Policing was imposed upon that community.
So you understood their grievances and...
Yeah, but foolishly I got swept up along with it all. You know, I became a really unpleasant, racist, horrible twat because I saw it everywhere. And if all right, I'm 18, 19, so I should have known better. And I should have blown the whistle, but there was no one to blow the whistle to in those days.
That's the biggest problem, isn't it?
Because as I said, you know, racism in those days wasn't institutional, it was compulsory. And to my eternal shame, and I've apologised for it many, many times, and I'll do so again, I got wrapped up in it. I got swept up in it.
I think it's a big man that can admit that.
The police and a lot of society was so determined that there wasn't going to be any merging of these communities, of these cultures and the like. Some people in policing had an expression that said, black and white stop on sight. So in other words, if you saw a black person and a white person walking down the street together, well, what are they doing? They shouldn't be mixing. So you'd stop them and you'd search them. And of course, a lot of abuses came out of that.
Do you think that's obviously, I mean, obviously we've gone a long way from them. Things have changed dramatically. Dare I say it, are there times now perhaps when that's worked against the police now?
Well, the police still, in London certainly, in terms of recruitment, still have a problem in getting enough black and brown and other minority faces into policing. And I think that is probably still a hangover from all those decades ago.
Is that trust? Trust?
It's trust. There are a lot of worrying statistics that come out of the police saying that if you're black or Asian, you are 80% more likely to end up on a discipline matter than a white police officer will. So there's stuff that they're just not getting right, although there has, of course, been considerable progress, but more needs to be done. And the police are aware of that, and I'm sure they are putting considerable efforts in to do it, but you've got to get, once every community trusts you, once every community gets treated the same, and that's important. You don't have to behave differently to one community because they're a minority, in my view. I think, and I'm talking about strictly within the bounds of policing now, for example, because policing's got itself in a terrible tangle through this expression, community engagement. They go out of their way to engage with minority communities, and they are convinced this is the way forward. Whereas actually, I think if you rewind a little bit and you treat everybody exactly the same, you are then going to gain the trust of those communities. And what I mean by that is, because every community, whether it be the LGBTQ plus community, a black community, a brown community, a Muslim community, whatever it may be, all of those communities are victims of crime. Crime occurs amongst all of those communities.
Yeah.
If you stick to the basics of policing and you investigate every crime against every person and you do it promptly and professionally and to the best of your ability, then you will naturally gain the trust and the confidence of those communities.
Yeah.
There would be no need to reach out to a particular minority community, because what do those communities want? They want their crimes investigated.
Yeah, same as everyone else.
Same as everyone else.
Yeah, yeah.
So if every police service, the length and breadth of the land, just forgot about a lot of this community engagement, because it's not necessary, in my view. Many will argue against that, but you focus on policing. So a Muslim gets their house broken into, right? Investigate it properly, and with a bit of luck, catch the burglar. A woman gets assaulted, investigate it properly, catch the perpetrator. A white man has his car stolen. You know, all of these kind of things.
All the same, yeah, we're all the same.
Just treat everybody the same, but investigate it properly, professionally, and to the best of your ability.
One of the gripes that I've had with the police in the past, and when I say gripes, I want to make it clear, I've got a lot of friends in the police force, right from Scotland Yard, right to regional firearms officers, etc. And they all know that I remain and always have been a supporter of the police. But there have been things that have happened to me in my life. We was discussing this again off camera earlier on, where I think at times, one of their favourite expressions these days seems to be not enough evidence. That's all I seem to hear from victims of crime. Oh, they did a good job, but they said there's not enough evidence. What is it about this? I think we all appreciate it. To arrest someone is one thing, but to charge them and then get them into court and get an arrest, get a conviction, obviously that requires evidence. But my view has always been, if you want that evidence, you've got to go and find it.
Hook me up to the blood pressure machine, right? Because it's going up and up and up as you speak. And you've nailed it before I gave my answer. There's not enough looking for evidence.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And the police will say, well, we have priorities. We can't investigate every crime to the nth degree because there are not enough resources.
And there is a point to that.
Yeah, but you know who started it all?
Go on.
The police.
Right.
Theresa May will be blamed, when she was Home Secretary and then Prime Minister, and a lot of blame does lie at her doorstep for reducing police numbers during what they called the decade of austerity, right? After the banking crisis in 2008. Yes, unarguably true. But the police have played a major part in their own downfall. And I'll tell you when this or how this came about. Many years ago, some clever bod, not, of a senior police officer said, look, we're overwhelmed with work here. What we'll do, we'll invent an expression which is called screening out. Okay, so where there's a crime reported, and we look at that crime report and there's no suspect named, there's no accurate description, we'll screen that crime out. In other words, we will not investigate it.
Yeah.
And along with that screening out of crimes came a lot of manipulation of crime statistics, the figures that the police put forward. For example, somebody comes home from work and they find that there are marks on their back door that have clearly been made by somebody with a crowbar, who couldn't get in, right? That crime is an attempted burglary.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious to see. Okay? You can see where a crowbar has been inserted, they've pulled it, it's snapped, they've not been able to get in. That crime was not reported as an attempted burglary. That crime was reported as criminal damage.
Right.
So suddenly, on a particular senior officer's watch, the burglary statistics got better.
Yeah.
When all it was a manipulation of those stats.
And that goes on all the time.
That has been going on across many, many police services for many years. So in that regards, the police only have themselves to blame because they've manipulated the stats. People have got promoted as a result of it. So it's made it kind of like a competitive thing, which of course is terribly wrong. And who gets shortchanged all the time? The public, victims of crime.
Yeah.
And I know that you and I share a passion about the service that victims of crime should get.
Absolutely. Look, you know, as I said, going back to the watches for a minute, Peter, you know, we was talking again before we came on here. I know you're aware of the level of watch crime, not only in London, but around the UK and indeed internationally. Why do you think that stealing watches has become, if it's not a silly question, because I think the answer is fairly obvious, why do you believe that stealing watches has become so popular, such a problem in the community?
Because there isn't a sufficient deterrent for that crime. And that stems from there are not thorough enough investigations into each and every crime. We know this. This is no state secret, although some within policing will try and deny it. There are not sufficient investigations. Sufficient people, the perpetrators, are not getting caught, not getting charged, not going to court, not getting convicted, and not getting appropriately weighty sentences. And so, of course, it merely encourages more people to commit more crimes of this type. And we've known that some of these watch thefts have had fatal, yes, fatal consequences. People have lost their lives for a watch. And I'm afraid that until something drastic is done, until policing really has, yes, the numbers of officers, the experience and the right training and the right vetting, so those officers are the right people. So until the police treat every crime as a priority, because there's an expression in policing, by the way, they say when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? I don't agree with that. When every crime is a priority, you suddenly have a nation that trusts its police and has confidence in its police.
Trust is a big problem at the moment.
Yeah, well, because so many wrong-uns, utter monsters, murderous, raping monsters have been caught within policing. Quite how these people have been allowed to get away with it and quite how they've been able to get into the police service in the first place is appalling. We know it's a scandal, it's all out there. We had a major report into the Metropolitan Police published just a couple of weeks ago by Baroness Casey, and she showed the organisation up for being in the state that I've been saying it has been for many, many years.
If someone like yourself was put in charge of policing in London right now, what immediate changes would you make?
Well, the first thing I'd do, in the highly unlikely event that I suddenly became the chief of police, the commissioner, right? What I'd do is I'd book out the O2 for 3 nights, right? And because of course you couldn't get all 30,000 of the Met Police cops attending on one particular night. I'd book out the O2, that big stadium with a 20,000 capacity or so in London. I'd book it out for 3 nights, so different nights, and I'd get somebody to work out so that on each of the performance nights, every officer should have been able to attend one of those evenings. And I'd make it a +1 so they could bring their partner. And I would stand up and deliver a chat. I'd make a Q&A element to it as well with everybody that works within the Met Police over those 3 nights. And essentially, the message would be always, and I mean always, even when you might be challenged, even when you might find that difficult, do one simple thing. Do the right thing. At all times. And it's so simple. If you have that mindset, you go to work, you're a police officer, you're a member of police staff, at every single moment, you do the right thing.
And we all know what the right thing is at any given situation, don't we really? Deep down, we all know when we're doing the right thing.
And if police officers don't know what the right thing is, and clearly some don't, then we're in a very, very dark place, and that's where the Met has found itself. It's a very simple message. Do the right thing. So when that officer speaks inappropriately, right, do the right thing. Get on the blower. If they said something racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever it may be, then challenge it if you want, but also report it. That person does not deserve to have a warrant card. Get them out. when you're at work and you're dealing with a stressful situation, a dangerous situation, whatever it may be, do the right thing. It's very simple.
Talking about danger, I know, you know, I've watched a lot of your, I've watched a lot of your podcasts or listened to your videos, etc. In all your years as a police officer, is there one moment that stands out in your career where you thought, this is the most frightening situation I've ever been in my life? Bearing in mind you've worked undercover and
unfortunately there's a number to choose from. You know, I've still got a scar in my neck where I got stabbed. You know, that was particularly disconcerting event, especially when one of my colleagues sat me down. You know, they'd wrapped a scarf around me and I was afraid to breathe in deeply because I didn't want to inhale my own blood and choke to death on my own blood, fill my lungs up and all that, because I didn't know the extent of how bad it was. That was all swiftly rectified when I was hurriedly taken to hospital on a blue light shout, wheeled into the A&E department, and there was this very tall and robust female doctor, and she unravelled the scarf and this, that and the other, leant over and went, "Flesh wound, stitches," and, you know, and I was out there an hour later, you know, so that was a great relief. Staring down the barrel of a sawn-off shotgun, which was literally inches from my face, when I found a man who'd escaped from prison, a murderer called James Bakery. I found him hiding in a van. I didn't actually realise he was in the van when I opened up the back door, got myself into it, and then his head popped up from beneath the blanket.
You didn't know he was there?
No. I mean, I had my suspicions. I'd heard he was a builder. This was a builder's. He was working as a builder. This was a builder's van. You know, and I was just nosing around. You know, as a detective. The best thing as a detective you can have is to be curious. You know, same as if you're going to be a journalist. Be curious all the time. Want to find things out. That's what it's all about, in my view. And so I was curious about this van because I'd heard he might be working as a builder while he was on the run. When I peered in through the windows, couldn't see anything, just like full of junk and rubble and back of an untidy builder's van. I put my hand on the door handle, it was open. I thought, oh, that's a bit of a result. You know, I'll go in and have a nose around. And literally, as I've kind of got my body half in, this head pops up from beneath the blanket. And I was so taken aback. I had my gun, the old Smith & Wesson revolver, in a shoulder holster, shows how long it was ago it was, right? The 2-inch barrel, and I went, "Oh, good morning." Training kicks in. I'm an armed police officer, but as I'm fumbling to get my gun, he literally just went to his side like that and put a up and over double-barreled sawn-off shotgun right like there under my nose. At which point, in the finest traditions of the Metropolitan Police, I legged it, right? Shouting to my mates, "He's got a fucking gun!" Like, because they were standing on the pavement deciding which cafe we were going to go to for breakfast. You know, after we'd searched the flat we thought we lived in. So that was a very, very close call. In fact, afterwards, he stayed in the van for 2 days. There was a siege. It closed off half of West London. And in the end, he put the shotgun to his head and took his own life. When they examined the shotgun, they found that the firing pin had hit one cartridge that hadn't gone off. But the second pin hit the second cartridge and that did go off, and that's what took his life. There were some people that suggested, well, maybe he pulled the trigger with that first cartridge when he aimed it at you. And that's the one that didn't go off. I didn't really buy that. I thought people were trying to over-dramatise things a little bit because it was in there for 36 hours or something, and there were other cartridges. So if that had happened, he'd have just broken it and reloaded, wouldn't he? But so I don't think... I'll never know.
You could dine out on it, couldn't you?
Well, and I have done. And here I am doing exactly that.
So over the years, how would you say that, you know, policing has changed in general in London? Would you say it's changed a lot, and the type of people that the Met employs these days?
It's changed hugely. The whole nature of policing has changed, and it's got more difficult. I'll happily admit that. Of course it has. You've got the internet. You've got CCTV.
Does that not make their lives easier, though, rather than harder?
Well, you see, when CCTV was originally a thing, back in the sort of 60s, 70s, and very, very few people had it, it was thought that it was going to be a crime deterrent. That's how it was sold. Put CCTV up, it deters crime. Well, now, of course, because it's everywhere, it doesn't deter any crime at all.
Yeah.
It's more an evidence-gathering resource rather than a deterrent. The internet, and of course internet-based crime and fraud, that's why there is so much fraud. Hardly any of it gets properly investigated.
Yeah, 1% I was saying on the TV the other day, 1%.
Yeah, I mean, it's just shocking, and it is a fraudster's charter, the internet. It's a fraudster's vehicle on which to operate, sadly. So that makes policing more difficult. Forensic science, you know, that's changed dramatically. Back in our day, if we had the old scenes of crimes officer come out with the powder, dusting, got a fingerprint, boom, bingo.
Yeah.
You know, science at the cutting edge, we've got a fingerprint. Well, of course, now that's dwarfed by DNA in all its guises, and of course other advances in forensic science, which means the detective has got so many more tools in that toolbox that we could only have dreamt of. But the murder rate, or the unsolved murder rate, is going up, not down. And you think it would go down, but sadly now it's going up. Again, I have to use that wretched R word. Resources is a part of it. But society's changed as well. London's changed. You know, I now as a white male, I'm in a minority in London, because we've had people from every corner of the globe come here and set up businesses and raise their families here and contribute to this amazing city being what it is.
Yeah.
And so all the different languages that are spoken. You can run around London like I do, on the underground, on the trains, on the buses, walking and all of that, and you hear goodness knows how many different dialects every day. That must be really challenging for police. Although, of course, they're hoping to recruit people, and they are recruiting people who have different language skills. It makes sense. Policing hasn't kept up. It's been too anchored in the past. Yes, it's got a more difficult job. Mental health, for example, they deal with so many people in mental health crisis. That's not a policing job. Get mental health nurses to deal with it.
Exactly, yeah.
That is not a policing job. You know, I joined the police, and so many people still do, because there is quite simply nothing, and I mean nothing better in policing than arresting someone. Right? When you've got them banged to rights, you've got the evidence, you've caught them in the act perhaps, you've chased them down the street, they've hid under that car, they've leapt over fences and bushes and all of that, and you go, boom.
So what's your most satisfying nick, would you say, and which one? So if I was going to say to you, what's your most satisfying nick, and which one frustrates you more than anything to this day? Could you choose?
Well, I was very lucky. I didn't work on a lot of murders, but each one that I did work on, we solved. So I don't have that frustration lingering over me of the case that got away.
Yeah.
But of course, murder investigation was not my specialism. You know, I only dealt with a handful of them. You know, the memorable. Of course, I've got utterly unforgettable times from working undercover. So when I wasn't acting as a police officer and I was acting as that gangster, you know, buying drugs and guns and plotting to kill people and counterfeit currency and lorry loads and all of that. And there was one entirely memorable moment when I was being driven around the back streets of South London by this rather frightening drug dealer. And I was off to buy a couple of kilos of cocaine, which back in the day was a big job, you know. Now people wouldn't get overly excited about a couple of kilos of coke at all. But there I was in his car, and he's got his hoodlum mate in the back, and I'm in the front. I've taken him to see the money. We've had negotiations over some considerable time, including being in his flat, when I was just surrounded by a posse of very scary looking people who were all there to have a look-see at me, you know, do you know him, do you think he's legit, etc, etc, etc. We're driving the car to do the exchange. I'm about to see the parcel, and when I see the parcel, I will give the signal which will lead to the arrests. And we're driving there, and he said to me, he said, do you know what, he said, them undercover old Bill, he said, they've put them into me twice. He said, twice I've had undercover old Bill sent, and he said, but I can smell them a mile off, he said, but as for you, mate, he said, we're going to get on very well and have a very successful business relationship, aren't we? I said, we most certainly are, buddy. He didn't smell this one. 30 seconds later, he was cuffed up and staring 9 years in the face. Wow. So, you know, you didn't smell this one, bud, did you?
Yeah.
There you go. So that was kind of particularly satisfying, you know what I mean? And each time it was, when you're talking about career criminals, people who were born into crime, they're raised in crime. Not people who've just thought they'd have a dabble at being a drug dealer.
Yeah.
People who have been around criminality all their lives, their entire lives, and you go in there because you've ditched your warrant card, you know, you've adopted and you've practiced your persona, you might have whatever it was that you saw fit, you know, as part of your kit, your undercover kit, and you go off and you negotiate with them, and sometimes it's tricky, sometimes it's a bit nose to nose, other times it's a bit more cordial, but all the time it's quite frankly terrifying, but you mustn't let that show. And then you hoodwink those career criminals into thinking that you were one of them. And
so real life Donnie Brasco.
Well, you know. And then,
I know that there was a stage in your career as well where you had to go into hiding. You had a real credible death. Would that have been called an Osmo morning for you, or?
No, it wasn't. That expression hadn't come to pass at those times, and it was all very unfortunate because it signalled the end of my policing career. So it's the mid-90s, I'm at the peak of my powers undercover. I'm invited to go various places around the world. I went to the FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia at the time, and witnessed their training and had an input and learnt a lot from the guys out there. Had a terrific time. You know, I was frequently going to Europe to either act in an undercover role or help with undercover operations, kind of at the peak of my powers. And together with a joint operation with what was then the Customs, who we had a kind of interesting relationship with. Yeah. Well, the bosses did. On the ground, me and them, you know, you get on fine, just go and do the graft, you know what I mean? It was a customs undercover operator, he was very good at what he did. I went in, we worked as a team, you know, no politics, no bosses in the way, because when we're in the bar and we're discussing with these people who were sponsored by terrorists to supply huge quantities of heroin, and we're negotiating to buy them, everybody's getting on just fine and being businesslike. It's only when you get back to the debriefing, because we had the FBI input, DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency in the States, Customs, obviously us, Scotland Yard, the Garda Síochána, the police in Ireland, you know, multiple agencies.
A lot of politics going on there.
And a lot of egos amongst the bosses, you know what I mean? Anyway, we did the job. We got the job done fine. And 15 kilos of heroin were delivered to me at the Gatwick Hilton. Okay, now at that point, again, it shows you how much the drug industry has grown, but at that point, 15 kilos was the largest land seizure of heroin there had ever been in the UK. I can hear current cops laughing at that, you know what I mean? 15 kilos, you know, they're seizing 150 kilos, half a ton these days, you know. But anyway, so it was a big job at the time. I spent about 3 or 4 hours in the hotel room with the guy who's delivered it to me. The room is bugged for wire, and, you know, for sound and video. And I spent 3 or 4 hours deliberately weighing and testing each of the 30 parcels. There were 30 half-kilo parcels. There was a number of reasons I was doing that. Number one, to look professional. Yeah, like I'm going to check every parcel, mate. So you better amuse yourself. Put the telly on. You're in the room.
Going through this.
I'm doing the lot, right? You know, a Stanley knife, a very sharp-bladed knife, small incision into the parcel after I've weighed it. Small incision. Pull out a little bit of the brown powder. Lay it onto a strip of silver foil, aluminium foil, which I've creased so it's like a V, and then I burn the powder. Very, very unscientific, but of course you've got to remember I've been working undercover for 10 years. I know my way around a bit of gear, and I knew whether it was Cremo gear or whether it was jank. And I'm burning this stuff, and I can tell I'm keeping it away from me because I don't want it all going up my Utah. And I can tell it's quality gear, not only by the way it burns, but when I lay the foil out flat, I see how much scarring is on the foil, right? If it's black and there's a lot of it, well, they're the adulterants, they're the sugars or something that it's been cut with.
Yeah.
That's what leaves the scar. The proper heroin goes up in smoke, of course, right? That's the proper gear. Very lightly scarred, this silver foil, you know, I'd scrape it off. It's all dramatics, you know, I'm just doing dramatics.
Yeah.
Part of the reason being, I've got colleagues in central London are showing hundreds of thousands of pounds in various safety deposit boxes. So we've got the operation many, many miles away, surveillance operation, evidence gathering, all of that against other conspirators, right? And the longer I've got him with me, the more we can talk about. And the more he can implicate himself.
Yeah.
And the more he can tell me about the operation behind who's doing what. So we gather intelligence. It's all about, you know, doing your job properly. So you imagine I had to do that 30 times, right? I did inevitably have a bit of a headache because, you know, some of the heroin I had inhaled. I wasn't stoned, I just had a headache. It was a bit of, I think it was a bit of the time, the pressure, and maybe, you know, some of the smell. Anyway, we leave the room, we're all smiles, we're going to go down to a hotel bar, have a drink and celebrate the start of a very lucrative and successful drug dealing operation. We only get as far as the lifts, of course, when all the old armed police come out. Get on the floor, blah, 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 and he and I get nicked. Well, people get nicked, go to court, and all of a sudden they're looking around in the dock going, where's that long-haired, cocky South London bloke? He's not in the dock with us. Ah. He must be an undercover cop, right? You didn't have to be Einstein to figure that out.
Yeah.
And as time went by, they worked on the theory that if they killed me, they killed the evidence. And to a certain extent, they were right, you know, because a lot of it hadn't been on video and audio and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that in itself wasn't a great problem, because they wouldn't have been able to trace me. You know, they only had my first name. So, you know, and getting threatened in those sort of situations is par for the course. Anyway, then what happened, and I'm sorry if I'm going on a bit, but this was a long, complicated operation. Because of the aforementioned aggravation between all the competing forces, you know, the law enforcement bodies, somebody was asked by the Deputy Commissioner to draw up a briefing note, a report, if you will, on how the operation had gone from start to finish. And in that report, which ran to about 7 or 8 pages, and people can read it on my website if they're interested, my real name was put in there, right? That's the first mistake, because in undercover policing, I had a number allocated to me by the SO10 office at Scotland Yard.
Yeah.
So that number should have gone in there, not my name. My name, which is an unusual name, unusual spelling. There's only about 14 Bleksleys in the UK, and I've fathered most of them, but no, only 3, right, only 3. Bad gag. My name is repeated in this report time and time again. That report gets printed off, gets taken out of police building. None of this should have happened, right? It then gets put in a briefcase in an unmarked police car, and the driver of that unmarked police car, on his way home from work, went shopping. So now everybody can guess what happened next. That car gets broken into. That report gets stolen. So when you think there is now a report with my name clearly in it multiple times, and there's the pre-existing threat to murder me, if those two ever meet each other, I'm in big trouble. Big trouble. So what happened, I was driving home from work one night. One of the bosses from Scotland Yard rang up and said, don't go home. And I'm like, do what, Governor? Yeah, don't go home. Move into a hotel overnight, use one of your false identities, and make sure you're at Scotland Yard 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Get your girlfriend to pack an overnight bag. So we spent that night, me and my girlfriend, in the hotel, and what the friggin' hell's going on here? Why can't I go home? You know. And so we smashed our way through the minibar, and I got to Scotland Yard bright and early the following morning, not 9 o'clock, you know what I mean? I'm a detective, I get there at 8 to, you know, poke my nose around, and my mate showed me a copy of the report. He said, have you ever seen this? I said, no. So he locked me in the photocopying room and said, there's a copy for you to keep because I think you might need it. And by close of play that day, it had been decided that I had to abandon my home, abandon my identity, and hurriedly move into the witness protection program.
Wow.
Where I spent 2 miserable years conspiracy theorising. I still had to work undercover. They still wanted me to work.
Yeah.
You know, it was ludicrous. I was 3 different people in any given day, right? It was mad. So I conspiracy theorised too much, I drank too much, and I smoked too much. And after 2 years of that, I had a catastrophic mental health breakdown. No surprise to anyone. And that really started the beginning of the end of my career.
That was the end, mark the end for you.
Yeah, eventually.
You've had I mean, would you change anything looking back? You've obviously had a long, interesting career. Would you change much?
That's a very difficult question, because a part of me would say, well, yeah, why would you go undercover because of all the catastrophic ending that it had? And the mental health problems didn't go away in a hurry, you know what I mean? In fact, I still take a tiny maintenance dose of medication to this day, which I have no shame over, because I'm fit, I'm well, I'm healthy, and I have been for many, many years, and my mental health is extremely robust, fortunately. Will I go undercover again? Well, I had some amazing times. You know, unforgettable times that I would not want to go without. But I could have done it a different way. Could I have specialised in murder investigations, for example, and had a very different career and, you know, have as many TV series as Joe Corder or something, you know, and all that. I don't know. I think I have to say no, I wouldn't change anything, even though there were some very, very dark days. I'd have to say I'd do it all over again, possibly.
What's your view on capital punishment?
No, I don't want to live in a country where we murder our own citizens, as appalling as those people may be.
Not even for the child killers?
Well, there's one man that has seriously challenged my thinking on this, okay? And he's an utter piece of garbage by the name of Levi Belfield, right? And I'm not going to mention his name without mentioning Marsha McDonnell, Emily Delagrange, Millie Dowler, and the wonderful Kate, who would have been another murder victim of his, but she stood up at the Old Bailey courageously, having suffered horrendous injuries, and brilliantly, heroically gave a lot of evidence which went a long, long way towards convicting that monster. And there were other victims of Belfield's. Many cases were left on file because he got a whole life term. He'll never taste freedom. So there was no point spending a lot of other public money and resources on other trials, because he simply can't get any more jail time. I've really challenged my thinking over that, because he is an absolute oxygen thief.
It's an interesting topic. When I was younger, you know, I was a big advocate and a big believer in capital punishment. I think as I got older, I slightly changed my mind and came round that maybe that way of thinking. But like you say, you know, for me, there are circumstances that the capital punishment for me really is in order. Another one is Ian Huntley.
Yeah, of course, and sadly we could sit here and name quite a few of them, but, you know, let's remember Holly and Jessica and not that piece of shit.
Absolutely.
You know. It's an interesting debate. I know it rages in many circles. The thing for me, though, is what is real punishment for them is waking up every day and having to look in the mirror and face the consequences of their actions. If we look at people like Fred West and Harold Shipman, again, serial murderers who were sentenced to whole life terms, they both took their own lives. And there's been many, many others, because they couldn't face the consequences.
They want a way out.
They want a way out, you see, and I think sticking a rope round their neck gives them a way out, right? I hear stories. I've got sources throughout the prison service. Not throughout. I've got some strategically placed sources within the prison service who from time to time get in touch with me, and there is a hierarchy amongst these monsters, you know, and some of them enjoy their notoriety while they're inside and all of that, but you know what, they've got pretty rubbish lives inside, okay? It really isn't a cakewalk. And every prisoner I've ever known, and I visited a lot of jails, always wanted to be on the outside.
Yeah, of course.
I never met anybody that wanted to do another extra day's bird, ever. So that's the punishment for me, to see them for the rest of their lives in the drudgery, in the same day after day, that Groundhog Day for years, for decades and decades, until they gasp their last. Unfortunately, some, as I say, enjoy their notoriety and sort of play the game sometimes, but they have pretty miserable lives, and if we stuck a rope around their neck, we'd be giving them a way out. However, I haven't been to America for a very long time, and my mind was changed about something very important when I went and trained with the FBI. Can I tell you the story?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to.
Okay. I, when working undercover, was firmly of the opinion that you never break your cover, no matter what. No matter whether you're threatened, being held hostage, you never break your cover. Because if you suddenly go, don't do that, I'm actually an undercover cop, you might be exposing informants that have introduced you, for example. You might be putting other people at risk somewhere down the line. So you've got to take it on the chin and never break your cover. And that was what I thought. And I did that for years. And I trained undercover cops over here, and I would spout that. I go to Quantico, and I'm chatting with this brilliant guy, top undercover operator. He said, okay, Peter, because we started talking about this. He said, righto, Peter. He said, listen to this. And he played a tape recording of an undercover cop who'd worn a wire, okay, on this operation. And he played a very harrowing tape to me. And sadly, during what was a very, very heated situation, clearly, with a man with a gun who was the subject of the operation, who they were trying to buy the gear off, getting very, very aggravated, and the undercover cop maintaining throughout that he was, a bad guy and not a cop, and maintaining it sadly to the last, because you hear the tape end. Well, not quite end, but there's a gunshot.
Yeah.
And then tragically and very disturbingly, you hear this cop, his breathing getting shallower and shallower, and then he takes his last breath and passes away. So the cop who's playing me this tape from the FBI, he said, so what do you think now, Peter? You still have the same opinion? And I went, He said, actually, what happens now, if it comes to life or death, we say, declare that you're an undercover cop. Throw your hands up and say, yeah, all right, guys, look, I'm an undercover cop. Because in America, if you shoot a cop, in all likelihood, you will go to the electric chair.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas, if they say, look, I'm an undercover cop, don't shoot me, we can move on from all of this.
It out.
There's no need for you to pull that trigger, me die, and you go to the electric chair. And he said that has actually saved cops. So it really changed my thinking completely and utterly on that.
Different justice system over here, though.
Yes, it is, but still the principle about, please don't pull that trigger. All right, okay, I am a cop. All right, I'm going to walk out here now, pretend this didn't happen. I won't write any evidence against you. We'll forget the drug deal. It's not happening. Please don't pull that trigger. I'm off, and you're free to live your life.
Yeah.
That would be, in all probability, they wouldn't be, but that might just get you out the door alive.
Just save your life.
Rather than passing away like that poor.
Just going back to the watches for a moment. What do you think of the manufacturers? I mean, we're talking about Rolex for an example, because obviously they're the most popular brand that everyone knows and one of the 3 most stolen brands in the world. What do you think of the manufacturers keeping these thefts, the serial numbers of these watches, and the details of these watches, almost a secret? They used to let the public know when watches were stolen, serial numbers, etc. That used to be available to dealers, to the general public. They took that facility away from us around about 15 years ago now. And since then, watch crime has gone through the roof. What do you make of that decision?
I think any manufacturer of anything that doesn't do all they possibly can to insure against crime not ensure as in getting policy, but try and prevent crime, is irresponsible. I think manufacturers of whatever it be, whether it be a high-value car, a high-value watch, a new home, anything like that, a phone, a laptop, should do all they possibly can to ensure that these goods are not attractive to steal, and if they are attractive to steal, that every kind of thing is done, or every kind of anti-theft device is placed into a car, for example, to ensure that it doesn't get stolen. Because otherwise, all you're doing is helping crooks
you're feeding
and villains. You're helping villains. You know, so, and I watched the golf this weekend. I watched the Masters on TV. I like watching a bit of golf on the telly when time allows. And they were having the Rolex hour or something, where you don't get any adverts other than Rolex adverts, you know. And they're all over this golf and stuff and other kind of things with their sponsorship. And I get that they're a very prestigious brand, and I get that so many people aspire to own one. I personally don't. I don't want a high-value watch, same as I'm not a petrol head and I don't want a high-value car.
Yeah.
I've got other priorities in life. I think the manufacturer of anything that willingly does something that is to the benefit of criminals is utterly irresponsible.
To take a long look in the mirror. That's what I've been fighting for, 3-4 years now, to try and get them to reinstate their lost and stolen register. You spent years fighting the bad guys. We've kind of like working in similar directions. Your career now as a retired detective, I mean, we see you all over the TV, we see you everywhere. Whatever's going on, Peter, you seem to be making a comment on it. You enjoy that?
Rent a gob. Certain people rather unflatteringly call me. When I came out of the cops and I was on the scrap heap of life, at 39, didn't know what I was going to do. Had no great education to fall back on, no trade. I wrote my autobiography. I was very fortunate to get a publishing deal for my autobiography, and that was published in 2000 or 2001. The Gangbuster, still available, pardon the plug, and that propelled me into the media, and I've been commenting in the media for a long time now about crime and policing. I study crime and policing, of course, because it's my job. And whilst policing has changed in so many ways, it's important that when I get on the telly, I am contemporary and I know what I'm talking about.
You're up to date.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I've got some reliable sources still within policing, and of course my wife worked within policing until a few years ago when she retired. So, to a certain extent, I've still got my finger on the pulse. I don't always say the comfortable thing or the popular thing. So I do from time to time get massive pile-ons of hatred from police officers, retired police officers, who just don't like me telling the truth.
Yeah.
Well, that's their problem, not mine, because I know that in 2 or 3 days it's all died down and it's nonsense. And if their souls are so full of hatred, then I should think they must live inherently miserable lives, but there you go. And I enjoy it. I'm flattered that people keep inviting me back, but it is my job. I'm all across every policing story every day.
And is it because, I think it's because you tell the truth, that you're invited back to these shows time and time again?
I think so. I think audiences, that's what the feedback I get is, audiences a lot of the time like what I say because I say what they're thinking, which probably isn't what the police are saying. I'm sick to death of these senior police officers standing up only when they've been forced into a corner.
Yeah.
Because some inquiry is found against them, or a case has gone dramatically wrong and they've attracted a load of criticism, or Baroness Case's report gets published. They get forced into a corner, and it's only then that you get some senior police officer standing up there in uniform with all his regalia on his shoulders, or her shoulders, and they say, "Yes, we're sorry." No, you're not actually sorry. You've been forced into doing this. Yeah. You didn't say it voluntarily. You didn't get out there in front of the inquiry before you knew you were going to get found out. You've been forced into saying, "We're sorry," and lessons have been learned. If I hear Well, in fact, every time I hear that, lessons have been learned.
Yeah.
It's become meaningless. It's become worthless because they just trail it out again and again. And it insults victims. It insults the intelligence of the public. And as you can see, it irritates me a lot.
Just before we go, tell me, viewers, about your book and your website.
Thank you. I've written 4 books. They're all available on the regular sort of your Amazons and that kind of stuff. And they're also available as audio books. I recorded them as audio books last year. The Gangbuster, On the Run, To Catch a Killer, and Manhunt. And
by the way, guys, I just got to say, if you want something to listen to whilst you're flying off somewhere, I guarantee you won't find anything better.
Well, you're very kind. Yeah, I've got a website, peterbleksley.com. I don't update it perhaps as often as I should.
I did notice that.
But yes, I'm a bit lapsed with that, so please forgive me. Tech and IT is not my specialist department. However, now I've said it, I better get on board it, and I will.
I've got one last tip for you before we go.
Yeah.
Mayor of London?
Unfortunately, the Mayor of London also has the job of the Police and Crime Commissioner for London. They're bound together. And it frustrates me hugely because I live in a London borough. Yeah. I've lived in a London borough all my life. This is my home city that I have an absolute passion for, and I love it with every part of my soul. I love this city. If the Police and Crime Commissioner role was separate from the Mayor's role, I would run to be the Police and Crime Commissioner of London. But it's not. It's part of the Mayor's role, and to be elected London Mayor, you have to be, of course, the representative of one of the major political parties. So I'd be, quite frankly, wasting my time, efforts and money by ever trying to get elected Mayor.
Peter, it's been wonderful speaking to you, mate. I hope it's not the last time. You've been absolutely first class. Hopefully a new audience for you and a new audience for me as well. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing, because there's so many people out there that appreciate what you're doing, the truth, the whistle blowing, and just telling us what life's really all about. I did forget one thing, something that I always try and do. I always try and end some of my more philosophical videos with a tip for the youngsters to stay out of trouble. Just lead a decent, clean life. It's not all about being big time Charlie. It's about leaving a legacy in life, doing the right things. What would your advice to be to the younger generation out there? Because I think Londoners have changed, right?
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth.
3 words. Tell the truth. Now, that might sound a bit strange coming from a bloke who was paid to be a professional liar. Yeah. Right? I was paid for over a decade to go out there and tell lie after lie after lie. Right? And I managed to do it quite successfully. However, I'm not a youngster anymore. I look back sometimes and reflect upon the mistakes I've made in life, things that I've done all right, but other things that I shouldn't have done, and things I could have done a whole lot better. And I think, to sum it all up, it would simply be tell the truth. When I've got in trouble in life, it's been the lies that have got me in trouble.
Led you there,
yeah. The truth has never got me in trouble. The lies have.
As we reached the end of this video, I was thinking maybe that this was more for me than for you guys. It's good for my soul, and the wounds that were left on me by bad policing still haven't healed even after all these years. Peter and I share a passion to see victims of crime treated fairly, professionally and with integrity, something that I certainly never received. But I remain very mindful that the vast majority of our serving police officers do a wonderful job. Whilst we're running away from trouble, they're running towards it, and for that, we should all be grateful. As for watch crime, Peter got it right again. Until the courts dish out some proper justice, criminals will continue to view decent members of the public as nothing more than a potential victim. London, I still love the place with all my heart, but things ain't what they used to be.